Dear friends, welcome to Singular's new video podcast. We at Singular are a unique team of multi-interdisciplinary experts in the areas of artificial intelligence, blockchain, longevity and vitality, smart mobility, and smart cities. In this podcast series, we discuss recent developments in exponential technologies and how they are shaping the future of major segments of our lives. In today's episode, our experts are going to talk about the status of investments in AI for the past year, which industries received more funding, and in which countries. We'll be also discussing the new wave of AI regulations around the world, as well as the most pressing concerns regarding governance and ethics. Finally, we'll have a look at what our experts think are going to be the hot topics in artificial intelligence for this year. My name is Roberta, and I am in artificial intelligence. I don't really exist. Or as some would say, I do exist, but just in a digital format. I really hope you'll enjoy this podcast. I'll be seeing you again at the end of this episode.
Welcome to the Singular podcast. I am Maria Abou-Sakr, and I am hosting this episode today. I am a partner at Singular Group. Singular is a Swiss-based company that is a unique combination of three things: strategic advisory, technology development, and venture capital with a focus on exponential technologies. Our VC invests in early-stage startups, European startups in the areas of longevity and vitality and smart mobility and smart cities. We are passionate about technology topics that are fundamentally impacting the world, like AI, which is the topic that we will be discussing today. I am joined by my colleague, Luca. Hello, Luca.
Hello, Maria. Hello, everyone. My name is Luca Sambucci. I am also a partner at Singular Group and the head of artificial intelligence. And together with Maria, we author every 3 months a short briefing called the AI Brief, with the aim of providing the top AI-related stories of the quarter to an audience of managers, leaders, executives, investors, to be read in the least amount of time. We aim at making our artificial intelligence briefing something you can read in 5 or 10 minutes, after which you'll have an overview of the most important AI-related stories that happened in the last quarter. This year, we published for the first time a yearly briefing that provides the most important stories for 2021, along with our predictions of what will be the AI trends for 2022. You can download everything from our blog, which is blog.singular.group, that's SNGLR.group, or on our LinkedIn page. Or if you found this podcast somewhere on the internet, chances are we included a link there somewhere. So, without further ado, let's see a few highlights from this yearly briefing. From the investments point of view, how was 2021? Was it a good year or a bad year for AI compared to 2020?
Well, 2021 was a great year for AI companies. We saw many AI startups become unicorns, and also 2021 was a record year in terms of the value of private investments in AI companies, which reached almost like $90+ billion. Although the number of deals in 2021 has not increased much compared to 2020, it was actually almost the same, the funding amount received in 2021 almost doubled. And this was mainly driven by large mega rounds of funding, like large deals in size, which are deals above $100 million that happened throughout the year.
And how do you explain the large increase in number of IPOs and M&As in 2021?
Well, AI exits, whether through IPOs or M&As, are a sign that the AI industry is actually maturing. And the number of exits has been increasing for some time now. It slowed down a little bit in 2020, and that is because of the COVID uncertainties, but overall the trend is upward. And this increase is largely reflecting a maturing sector. And there are also other signs that indicate that the sector is maturing. For example, there is an increasing share of investments in later stage rounds versus seed or Series A rounds. Also, there is an increase in the average deal size, and there is an increase in the number of unicorns in the industry.
Do you think this is happening as a natural consequence of startups becoming successful and scaling up, or are investors becoming slightly more risk averse?
Well, this is happening because AI startups are reaching a new level of growth. And as a natural next step, you would either IPO or get acquired. So investors here are still investing large amounts of money in the sector.
So tell us, where is the money going exactly?
Well, the US remains by far the leading destination for private investments in AI companies, and it is followed by China. But it's important to note here that China has massive public investments AI companies that it's very difficult to estimate. And in terms of industries, the AI healthcare and the AI mobility sectors are among the top industries that are attracting large amounts of funds in 2021.
And why do you think healthcare and mobility attract so much investment?
Well, the strong growth in AI healthcare can mainly be explained by two things. One is the abundance of data in the healthcare sector, whether it's data coming from patients, smartphones, etc. And as we all know, data is a key component for the AI solutions. And two, because there is a need for more efficacy, precision, and better care in the healthcare sector. And we saw this emerging even more during the latest pandemic. Now, as for the AI mobility sector, where the money is mostly going to autonomous or self-driving vehicle technologies, and the sector is witnessing a lot of mega rounds of funding, large investments, large deal sizes that are happening throughout the year.
With the fast growth of AI solutions that are either specific to industries or cross industries, how are businesses addressing this technological trend? Is the game for them at this stage to innovate or be left behind?
Well, more and more companies are realizing the benefits of AI. And as we can see, the AI adoption rate has been increasing every year. And this is mainly because, one, the technology is becoming more mature. Two, because the landscape is becoming more competitive and businesses need to find new ways to compete and to boost their productivity. And three, because companies are looking for new ways to be more resilient, especially after the COVID crisis. But that being said, many companies today face challenges in adopting AI. It's either because people in the organizations are not ready for it, or the organization structure is not ready for it, data is unstructured, systems are not ready, or maybe because they fear any cyber incidents, especially if the company is dealing with sensitive data. So it's really not always a walk in the park, and sometimes these companies need external advisors to help them throughout their journey. Our AI team at Singular could assist these companies in the AI adoption. Well, let me ask you a question, Luca, here. What has been your favorite AI use cases for 2021?
Thank you for the question. As a matter of fact, our brief includes some of the AI use cases we liked most in 2021. Now, we won't have the time to go through all of them, but if you're asking me about my favorite use cases, I'd like to mention, first of all, the rise of autonomous trucks. Now, everyone is talking about autonomous cars, and that's okay because it's one of the AI's most visible and also most complex use cases with a lot of potential, but also even more challenges maybe. Now, as for trucks instead, it's still self-driving, but it happens only on highways where there is far less complexity than inside a sprawling city. You don't have pedestrians on highways most of the time. You don't have kids playing football on the sidewalk. So driving there for AI is much easier. And when the truck approaches the warehouse, the so-called last mile, then the human driver, who's always on board, takes over and completes the delivery. So I choose two. My first favorite use case would be autonomous trucks, also because they provide clear metric for success. In the case that we mentioned in our brief, there is a test in the US that allowed a delivery cross-country to happen 10 hours faster than with a human driver. So that's a metric right there, faster deliveries. Then I want to pick another use case I liked most, and I'd say it would be the AI-designed drug that started clinical trials. There's a company called Exscientia that used AI to help design a bunch of new molecules, and one of them was so promising that they started phase 1 trials in the US. Now, as you know, this doesn't mean the drug will be viable for commercialization. You need to pass several phases, but still, AI can bring tremendous value to medicine overall. Drug design, personalized medicine, that's definitely one of my favorite use cases for artificial intelligence. And that's where AI can truly benefit humanity.
Nice. Now, besides use cases, what do you think has been the most trending topic in AI in 2021?
I believe that the most trending topic in AI we had last year was by far regulation. Now, the previous years, we witnessed how politicians finally discovered AI. They understood the transformational power of AI. They started to understand, let's say like this. And they understood the potential, but obviously also the challenges. So they did what they do best. They started the process of regulating it. Now, I'm not saying that in a negative way, although perhaps it sounded negative, but I personally believe that we need to have AI regulation. Regulation brings clear rules for all. And the one thing that businesses need is clarity of rules, to know what's in and what's out. The biggest regulation effort last year came from the European Union, shocker, where the proposal for an AI regulation, also known as the AI Act, was published in April. Now, let's remember briefly what an EU regulation is. When it's approved, it's law all around the EU. It's not a directive that needs to be transposed into every single member state law. The regulation is immediately the law. It's like the GDPR. And the AI Act aims to be a sort of GDPR for artificial intelligence. Now, I won't really discuss in details what's inside, what it will bring, because right now it will be almost useless. It's being changed right now as we speak in a struggle between different stakeholders, and something that is going to be out maybe next year, maybe in 2024. Still, it's one important regulation attempt. Other policies in 2021 were issued by the UK, that aims to become an AI superpower in the next 10 years, by Italy, my country, and by one of the actual AI superpowers, namely China, with a regulation effort that started last year, but that's continuing this month with a series of new policies. Now, as for the United States, they merely established the National AI Initiative Office at the White House. They don't want to regulate artificial intelligence too much, but they still like to keep things under control.
So countries are now like putting in place like some sort of regulatory framework for AI through laws or regulations or different initiatives. But how are these actually, like the laws, regulations, initiatives, how are these impacting investments in AI overall?
Well, regulations are a big part of what's happening and what's going to happen in AI. And I'm making an example here. If facial recognition gets regulated into oblivion, if someone has investments into a facial recognition startup, then there might be problems. If AI for human resources gets labeled as dangerous AI, something you need to provide lots of approval and documentation for, then your investment into AI for HR might become more challenging. But at the same time, regulation can open the door to other AI projects or initiatives. For example, regulation mandates that AI must be explainable in some areas. If that happens, if that really becomes law, then I might think that startups that have an explainable AI game changer would rise. Something that allows to peek inside the AI black box and help determine why an AI system decided that way and not the other way. So maybe an investment there would make sense in that case. Just to make sure we are all on the same page here, these are just examples. We are not telling you where to invest your money in this podcast. But what we are telling is that investors need to closely monitor AI regulation to see which avenues might become more difficult and which ones suddenly open up.
Mm-hmm. But why are governments now so concerned about regulating the AI topic? I mean, why are they doing it now?
Because AI is as transformative as it is problematic. We always include an ethics page in our brief because ethical problems are extremely frequent in AI. Biases, manipulation, and of course, facial recognition, a wonderful dual-use technology that can be so helpful but also so dystopic. Governments, of course, need to regulate all that. Otherwise, citizens, AI us, will be at the mercy of whoever controls the best algorithms.
Mm-hmm. And how would investors actually make sure that when they're investing in a company, the company is actually using AI ethically?
Okay, 3 ways. 1, make sure the team is aware. The team of the company you're investing in, that's what I mean. If they do AI, if they use AI, they cannot be clueless about the possible ethical repercussions. So make sure that the whole team is at the very least aware that there is such a possibility, that an AI system can be biased, that it can bring about ethical issues. Just like you want them to be aware about cybersecurity, okay? That they shouldn't click any link they see. They need to have this sort of basic awareness. Now, the second thing would be to have them run an initial due diligence on how their AI models are being used or how they are going to be used. Are they employing computer vision algorithms? Great. Make sure it treats Black people and white people the same way. Are they employing language model? Awesome. Make sure it doesn't discriminate between men and women. Have them run a due diligence on their models, whether the law demands it or not. And the third thing, and in my opinion, that's a no-brainer, make sure someone in their team is responsible for the AI ethics and follows the developments in AI regulation. That person needs to own the project, to be accountable for it, and have decision-making powers. It cannot be a junior that can be laughed out of the room by the managers. It needs to be someone with enough power to be able to make a stand if they find something ethically wrong in their AI systems.
Mm-hmm.
But now let me ask you a question. I'm curious as what for you is the most worrying AI problem at this time.
Well, I mean, besides all the topics that you just mentioned, I guess privacy is the topic that worries me the most. And I think AI is affecting privacy in many ways. For example, via the intelligent personal assistant like Siri. I mean, these devices are learning so much about us every day. They know what we like to eat, what we like to listen to, what we like to do. And they are always listening in the background. So I feel it's a bit creepy. So my concern is that these devices could get hacked somehow, and all this data could be one day in the hands of someone else.
Absolutely. Privacy is another very hot issue. These companies have the data you give them explicitly, but they also have the data that they infer about you. And what does it mean that they infer? Your behaviors already gives them data, what you are doing, even without giving data to them explicitly. For example, through your GPS, several companies know about your commute. Mm-hmm. Companies can infer where your child is going to school without you ever telling them. AI knows it because you go there every morning and stay there only for a few minutes. And there's a school there. So your kid most probably goes to school there. Lack of privacy, absolutely, very big problem. So our brief also mentions other important stories, for example, about foundation models or about AI in the metaverse, but to keep it concise, we decided to simply provide links to our blog. So whoever is interested can read the stories there.
Great. So now enough talking about 2021, and let's look ahead at 2022. So what do you predict will happen in AI in 2022? What are the main trends that will drive AI in your opinion?
So in our yearly brief, we introduce 5 predictions. And if we are bold enough, 1 year from now, we are going to check whether we were right. The first prediction is that large language models will become even larger. Granted, it's an easy prediction to make, but it's a trend that cannot be ignored. Language models are what allows AI to understand humans and to answer back. It's what powers chatbots. It's your personal assistant. It's Siri. It's the machine that reads your customer support email. And one particular thing about large language models is that the larger they are, the better they become. One industry standard is GPT-3 by OpenAI. It's a large language model, but today even larger models exist. And this year we are expecting GPT-4 that should be even larger, therefore much better than the already stunning GPT-3. Mm-hmm. But can anyone, just anyone, make a large language model? Unfortunately not, because it requires a tremendous amount of computing resources to train. Therefore, only big tech or countries can train the very large ones. And there is an arms race where 3 or 4 big companies like Google, Microsoft, so on, and at least one nation state, namely China, are competing. Where are they going to stop? We don't know. We just know that large language models will keep growing this year.
And like what are the companies or like the industries that will benefit the most from these large language models?
Some functions are common to all industries, like customer service, call centers, digital marketing for language production, any industry that needs language understanding, like the legal profession, for example. Mm-hmm. So anywhere you see text, wherever you hear the spoken language, that's where large language models can potentially take over the task from humans. Okay. Now, in the next prediction, we think that synthetic data will be more and more used to train machine learning models. Now, brief explainer on how machine learning works, very brief. You need to gather, curate, and clean large sets of data and have your machine learning algorithm ingest them in order to learn something. Do you need an algorithm that recognizes a cat from a dog? You need to give it thousands of pictures of cats and dogs in order to build a classifier. Now, sometimes finding such data sets is hard. It's time intensive, it's expensive. Sometimes it's even illegal. For example, do you have a document allowing you to use those pictures for your algorithm? Maybe you downloaded them from the internet, so probably you don't have such document. That's where it's illegal. So data enrichment becomes, in some cases, a necessity. And since new AI models are becoming better and better at generating realistic stuff, it now became viable to use them to generate data, fitting some parameters, and use that data to train another AI model. So you need pictures of cats. AI models now can generate millions of pictures of different cats. They probably won't be all perfect, but that's okay. The sheer size of the data set will allow the AI model to be trained sufficiently well for the task.
Mm-hmm. And like given that like a reliable set of data, like you're describing it, can magically be created like this. So when does a company know that now it can use the real data versus the synthetic data?
It's both a technical and a business decision. So you need to take into account the accuracy of your algorithm when trained through synthetic data, which is often somewhat worse than those trained through real data. So if it's not a big deal, if your algorithm has an accuracy of 85% instead of 90%, and it's not a big deal for you, then it could make sense to use synthetic data. And this decision, of course, is coupled with the business side of things. How expensive is it for you to collect real data? Will you have time to do it? What about the legal repercussions? So you have to decide it also with these factors in mind. Another way could be to use hybrid data. So you collect a tiny amount of real data, and then you generate a massive amount of synthetic data. And the right balance could give you a mixed data set that is just right for your business purpose. Mm-hmm. The third prediction we have is that soon we'll see a surge of low-code or no-code AI platforms. Now, what is low-code, no-code? As the name says it, it's a tool that allows you to build an app, an AI app, with very little code needed, or maybe no code at all. So you point and click, you build your data sets, you move settings, you swap machine learning algorithms without the help of the developers, or with little help. These platforms allow companies to implement AI models without the need of having too much help from hard-to-find roles, such as machine learning engineers or data scientists, and so on. Some platforms are being used by machine learning engineers and data scientists to make their job faster and less cumbersome. So, in a nutshell, these are ways to make AI implementation easier and faster. And we think they're going to really increase their penetration in the market this year.
So low-code platforms are an easier and a faster way to have AI solutions and to implement them. But do they have any downsides or limitation? Like, can any company decide to use like low-code platforms?
Yes, these platforms can be used in any business to optimize the AI workflow. The most obvious limitation is granularity, the customization. They allow you to do stuff in some standardized way, but if you want or need your own particular customization, then you will need to hire your own developer.
Okay.
Now, our fourth prediction out of 5 is closely tied to what we were discussing earlier about regulations. Complex AI models today are powered by deep learning. And complex deep learning has this problem of being a black box where you cannot really understand why it took that decision. Now, I'm simplifying a lot here. We could spend hours debating what can be explained, what not, what does it mean, explanation, and so on. But suffice it to say, AI has a black box problem. And we think that regulation will ask it to be fixed, at least in some areas. If you're employing an AI system in a hospital, for example, to perform treatment recommendations, I bet the doctors will want to know why it chose that drug for that patient at that specific dosage. So you need to sort of explain that. Mm-hmm. And here is where the explainable AI comes in. There are methods and techniques that allow, till a certain degree, to make an AI model understandable. And applying these methods in some industries or for some AI use cases might become mandatory in the future, depending on how some regulations are going to be released. And we think that companies that develop these methods will get more traction these years.
So would explainable AI solve for like the AI social biases that we discussed earlier? The facial recognition, privacy, like all these issues related to ethics?
It will not solve them, but it might be able to tell us why it selected a certain decision over another. And that would definitely inform the ethical side of things as well. Now, the last prediction of our brief is very dear to me. As you know, Maria, I come from the cybersecurity industry, where I spent most of my career, and I can clearly see how AI and cybersecurity are made for each other. What we're having today is a cyber arms race where AI is an important part of the fight.
How have the cyber incidents evolved over the year? I mean, have they been decreasing with the rise of the AI-based security solutions, Or did actually all the hackers catch up with this technology as well?
Criminals are definitely using AI to make their attacks better. Defenders are using AI to spot them earlier and counteract faster. All in all, artificial intelligence is going to play such a tremendously important role. And since it's an arms race, defenders need to be always one step further, than the attackers in order to win. Now, attackers, they are criminals. So they are fast, nimble. They don't have bureaucracy. They don't have shareholder meetings. They are like startups. They implement fast, they act quickly, they fail many times, but if they manage to find the right hole, they win big. Cybersecurity companies, instead, they have somewhat of a problem, in my opinion, with innovation. They cannot fail fast. They cannot experiment indefinitely. They have shareholder meetings and they have stock prices. So one way to implement new cybersecurity solution, new AI-powered cybersecurity solutions is to acquire startups. Mm-hmm. Let others do the hard innovation. And once you spot something you can use in your defensive software, buy the company and the developers and integrate it. So with this mentality, I see several big tech and cybersecurity companies acquire smaller AI companies in order to pump up their defenses, their solutions, and add innovative AI models to those.
So AI is really a very wide topic that is evolving every second, every day. And given all the recent developments in the field, AI offers today important benefits and important opportunities for businesses. And businesses should really learn how to seize from these opportunities.
Absolutely, absolutely. AI now is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to save costs. It's an opportunity to have more revenue, to become more efficient, and maybe even to outpace the competitors. Now, we do, at Singular, we do have a complete offering in AI that starts small with trainings for leaders, executives, and an initial report that we call AI Checkup, where we check what your company is missing to properly implement AI and what's been happening in your market with AI. But we also offer prototyping workshop, a fully fledged AI strategy for your business, hiring and headhunting help, and of course, assistance in implementing any AI project that fits your business.
Great. Thank you, Luca, for today's podcast.
Thank you, Maria. And one important thing, don't forget that we also have a VC fund. We have two VC funds, actually, that invest in early-stage European startups in the areas of longevity and vitality, and smart mobility and smart cities. And we do that while keeping a keen eye on their enabling technologies, most importantly, AI and blockchain. We think that those industries and technologies will experience the most significant disruption with tremendous economic growth, fundamentally changing our future and how we live our lives. So if you're interested in investing in these disruptive technologies, please reach out to our social media channels.
Thank you for listening to Singular's podcast. Today's episode revolved around artificial intelligence, what happened in 2021 and what will happen in 2022. We hope to have answered some questions you might have had or clarified some doubts. At Singular, we are consultants, tech developers, and investors. If you are interested in these disruptive technologies, then do reach out to us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channels, so you'll get notified when a new episode of our Singular podcast gets published. We hope to see you soon. Take care.